Welcome to this evening's presentation, and thank you for all showing up. Before I forget this again, this is the attendance register, which I please would like to ask you to fill out. If you are already a member and your email address hasn't changed, you don't need to put in your email address again, because obviously you did receive our notifications. If you, however, want to be part of our WhatsApp group, you please need to give us your cell phone number, and then you need to save our number in your cell phone, because it's a broadcasting channel. So it only works if both of us have each other's phone numbers, number one. And number two, it only works one way. So we inform, nobody comments, no missing dogs, no leaking water taps, just our information. So, good. I think, without further ado, please do come in. When we speak of maps, most of you will still remember, you know, the folding maps that we unfold and put on the banners and try to figure out where we are. The younger generation will know Google Maps, which is way easier than unfolding the big maps, and usually takes you from A to B if it doesn't take you through a canyon or an ocean or something. But only very few of us actually think about how we got here in the first place and the development of maps. So how was it about 500 years ago? How did they draw up the maps? What was important to them? What did they draw up? So it's a good thing that we have Professor Demhardt here with us tonight, who's a person that hasn't been just working with maps for decades, but he's also, fortunately, very interested in Southwest Africa history, Namibia history, and the mapping, of course, of this area. So when it comes to introducing our presenter for this evening, I can tell you that Mr. Demhardt has been a corresponding member for over 25 years. I can tell you that he resides in Texas. I can tell you that he loves tortoises. But I'm not going to talk about his CV, because I'm rather going to ask him to do it himself. So may I please ask you to introduce yourself, tell us why maps in the first place, and then tell us about the maps.
Okay, introducing myself is rather easy and can be quickly done, but explaining what fascinates me about maps and charts would take at least 1 hour, and then we can have just a quick run of 5 minutes through the maps I want to present. So I disobey the commands of route, so I just share with you that I'm born in Germany, and 17 years ago I got a proposal I couldn't decline. So I was offered the position of endowed chair in the history of cartography in Arlington, Texas. And Arlington, Texas is not the Arlington you possibly think about, the one next to the Pentagon in Washington. Many people ask me, okay, why exactly does National Cemetery needs a university? So I tell them Americans are not very imaginative about creating place names. So 25 states have an Arlington, and I happen to be from Arlington, Texas. If you want to find it on a map, think of Dallas. So this is the broader area. So there I am based, but my interest in Namibia goes back to the last millennium. So the first time I came here around was in 1988, and since then I'm in love with the country, with the people, the tortoises who roam around here, and of course with the spatial knowledge about Namibia. And since the Namibia Scientific Society is celebrating 100 years of activity, this year I thought, okay, I'm picking up the first 400 years of Namibia on the map and on the charts. So the good thing for you is I picked 16 maps, so 400 years can be hopefully condensed in a short while, so that I can give you an overview in about 45 minutes of the first 400 years of Namibia on the map. And yeah, it will be, as you can see from the title, coastal charts and orientation maps of the interior, and basically it will go from here, this is the 1502 map I will introduce in a minute, and this is Swakopmund at the turn at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. So what happened in this about 400 years? This is what I'm talking about. You don't need to take any notes if you are interested in, because this is a sneak preview of something what at least all the members should get pretty soon in the upcoming journal, the 2025 Journal of the Namibia Scientific Society. I have an article which has exactly the 16 maps I'm going to present with much more detail. So this is a sneak preview. You are ahead of the curve sitting here. All the others will get in greater details than the knowledge in a couple of weeks. So without further ado, let me get first into an orientation. And now, okay, this is an orientation map which comes from another volume I'm working on with a South African colleague. We are working on a book on 19th century maps and charts of Southern Africa. So not only Namibia, but South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique, and Swaziland, Lesotho is also in. And therefore we need an orientation map. And I thought it comes in handy to give an orientation on what's the physical situation. I don't have to brief you in detail what the physical situation of Namibia is, but if you have a look there off the coast of Namibia, of the Namibian desert, are the wind situation. So you have the southeastern winds. When you come or when you start at Cape Town, it conveniently puts you to the north. But if you want to go southward, and this is what the Portuguese did, then on to India, then it's much more difficult. Nowadays, since Ruth pointed to social media and to Google, it's only a mere 150 years ago that world traffic was on sailing terms. So you were at the mercy of the sea currents and of the winds to get along, and this had a great influence in the exploration of the Namibian coast. So just to recap, we have a dry environment here in Namibia. From the north to the south, it's increasingly getting arid. We have the coastal Namib Desert. The highest elevation is the Brandberg with 2,573 meters. And we have Namibia is what fascinates me about Namibia is that it is from the population, from the composition, who lives here in the country, it is outstanding. I don't think any other African country has such a diversity. And you can group it. In the north, you have then the Bantu migration. So by about the 12th, 13th century, they came from the north. In the south, we have the Khoikhoi group. So, and later then Europeans came in. So this is the greater situation where we begin. And I'm first talking about this area. Diego Cao and Bartolomeu Diaz in the 1480s made their way down the African coast and eventually rounded the Cape. The interest was, sorry to say this, not in Namibia. And when you come to the coastline and you see that it's a barren, treacherous coast, then you stay clear of it as best as you can do. Nevertheless, you need to get around it. So you see on this map of 1502, The detail on the left side is the one which will be produced in the journal, and the benefit of you coming out tonight is that you can see the full map on the right side. This is the Cantino planisphere. This is one of the most famous around 1500 early exploration map. Basically, it is a spy map, or other way around, it is a stolen map. So somebody paid somebody in Portugal to make a copy of the clandestine knowledge they had there, and this map nowadays resides in Italy, the original, and most people are interested on it because of what you can see in Brazil. And there you see what Brazil is named for. Brazil is the Portuguese name for wood or forest. And there you have then lorries, so very colorful birds. So this is what Brazil was famous for. And otherwise, everybody at this time was interested in India because there where all the spices came from. And this was what the Portuguese were aiming for. And to get there, you had to get around Africa. And this is the reason why we have the detail on the left-hand side. So the Portuguese inched along the coastline south, and the knowledge of the 1480s and early 1490s is embodied in this map. You see two patraus or crosses. Sorry, the upper one likely is the one of Cape Cross, and the other one in the south is in the Cape of Good Hope, and the mountains is either Table Mountain or Drakensberg Mountain. So for an area which was discovered just 10 years ago, having such a detailed map of the coastline is remarkable. And just as a cliffhanger, in essence, not much changes in the next 200 years. Okay. Nevertheless, I will show you something what happens in the next 200 years. So the Portuguese had their golden era in the 16th century. And by the end of the 16th century, their arch enemies cropped up also in Africa, and these were the Dutch. The Dutch had also not an interest in Namibia. They had the victualling station down in Cape Town, but in essence, they had no greater interest in Southern Africa initially first, but just having a stepping stone on the way to and from India. And in the 17th century, increasingly, the French got the upper hand in cartography. And I'm showing you 3 maps. They are just my selection of about 160 maps which were published between 1610, 1620, and the mid-later 18th century. And what do you see? So I picked then the details of what is Namibia. And the first one is from Nicolas Sanson, a map of Africa. And Nicolas Sanson, you need to know, it's not just any map maker. He is the map maker to the King of France. So he is the greatest authority of map making at his time in France. And you hardly, if there would not be the Tropic of the Capricorn in and Atlantic Ocean, you would not think that it is Namibia, because you have an undulating coastline, put it this way. You have many rivers emptying into the ocean. And on this map, he has also, he distinguishes between perennial rivers and rivers which we nowadays would call a rivier, which only runs when there is sufficient rainfall. So Sanson wants to make us believe that we have about 20 all year round flowing rivers emptying into the Atlantic Ocean. There are many, many bays, and we have then a spine, mountainous spine in the background, and you can see in the interior and lake. My personal opinion is that at this time there is hardly, not even hearsay, so don't think that this is the Okavango Delta or Lake Ngami. Lake Ngami in earlier times was really a lake, so it's not the shadow which it is nowadays. So it's not this, it is simply no knowledge of the interior, and then what cartographers call horror vacui, the fear of the emptiness. So imagine you have a customer. Sanson has his prime customer, is the King of France. He pays him a princely sum each year, and Sanson has to deliver maps, and the king wants content. So having just the coastline and barely anything else is not really what a customer wants. So if you pay for such a map of Africa in nowadays currency, it could be easily 50,000 Namibian dollar, and then you want to see something, not just an empty sheet. So there is a lot of fantasy, put it this way, therein. What I like about this map most, the ones who are sitting closer to the screen have the advantage. The other ones, like in the school, or in this case, because of not having enough seating here, I have to tell you, there is a green dot, and this is labeled as arboretum, or as a forest. And with the map comes a description, and it tells about in the area around Walvis Bay or Swakopmund of a very, very extensive and very lush forest. Okay, we have climate change, everything changes, but I don't think over 350 years a tropical forest around Swakopmund simply disappeared. So I guess this is wishful thinking that it's there, but this is typical for maps in the mid of the 17th century. Jump on for one generation to the year 1708, then we have Guillaume de Lille. He, again, is a cartographer to the King of France, so another very influential cartographer, and he clears up the map. So many of the bays have disappeared, but there are some still strange things. So you have the Rivière de Braguis, so this is in the middle of the coast flowing in, could be either the Kuisep or the Swakop. So from the coastline, you possibly could identify it, but the Montagne de Saint-Thomas or the St. Thomas Mountains are definitively not around Conception Bay. So, or I have missed something when I was on tour along the coastline, so I haven't seen these mountain ranges. And the same is when you go further up north, you see the Golfo Frio. There are also mountain ranges. Let's assume that this is about the highland where we are around Windhoek. He places man-eaters. So cannibals are sitting there. This is the anthropophagus. So this is the Latin version for man-eaters. So again, the map has a little bit cleared up, coming closer to reality, but at the same time, new inventions come on the map, like the Montagne de Saint-Thomas or the cannibals in the interior, but at least the lush forest around Swakopmund has disappeared from the map. And then enter the great reformer of cartography in the mid of the 18th century. We are at the height of the Enlightenment. This is Jean-Baptiste d'Anville, and he, again, is cartographer to the king, but now the fashion has changed. Now you want, or d'Anville said, I only print on the map, or and he draw on the map for what I have reasonable proof. So reliable sources, first-hand accounts, witnesses who had been there and whose accounts have been corroborated by others who also traveled there. And in result, you have only a coastline. Gone are almost all the bays. It looks much closer to what the coastline of Namibia looks in reality, but in the interior, everything what is true, for example, the Rivière de Prague. In this area, so obviously, we have a Swakop Rivière and we have a Kuisep, so this could have stayed on the map, but it was not corroborated and therefore it was cleaned. The famous map of d'Anville of Africa, when you see it, is for 95% empty. And this is a celebrated map because the taste has changed. You want rather correct information and you don't want something colorful what you can hang on your wall in your dining room. So this is a change in taste over time. None of the Frenchmen was in Southern Africa, and now I have to introduce you to maps based on accounts of somebody who really traveled here. And the very first who came to this area were the Dutch, from the Dutch East India Company, from this territory, who sent exploration expeditions up north to cross the Orange River and get into what's nowadays Namibia. And one of the earliest expedition is locked on Carl Friedrich Brink's manuscript map of 1761, which is, for the area where he traveled, is remarkably correct. So you have. Sorry that I have to switch that on. So this is the route. They are getting about to the area Marienthal, more or less. This is how far north they got. So they have the mountain ranges, the animals they encounter. They have the Fish River, correct, but since they only crossed at one point, the Orange River, the one what you see on the right-hand side, this is supposedly the Orange River. We all know it's flowing from the east to the west, at least in the portion which is important for Namibia, and not north-south-wise. And since Brink didn't come to the coastline, this is the most fascinating exaggeration. You have on the left side the Bay of Ancra Pequena, Lüderitz Bay, and you have Possession Island further south. And everybody who has been to the area around Lüderitz knows that Lüderitz Bay is not so spacious as it's depicted here, and the coastline looks a little bit different. How the coastline looks, I will show you on a later image. So maps like these from the late 18th century were later taken by cartographers who obviously didn't have Google or who could get information, and there is no National Geographic TV that you can get some second-hand knowledge by looking on your silver screen at home. So they had to rely on such route maps by travelers, and weighing then, okay, this traveler reports this is in conflict with another traveler reports, whom do I trust? And over time and a lot trial and error, then our modern maps, at least in the 19th century, came about. Of course, nowadays, we don't need anybody to travel. You only need a good link to the internet, and then you can get Google Earth, and then you can zoom in, and all the difficulties of travel on the ground and making then unlock are not necessary anymore. But this, what you see here, is one of the hundreds of informants on which the 19th century maps of Namibia are based on. Yeah, one of my favorite, it's a colorful map. You possibly would like it as a decoration for your sitting room at home, but there are two buts. First, it is French, and second, it is fake. And I am not implying it is fake because it is French. I have not said this. So this is of Mr. Le Vaillant, who traveled in the 1790s widely in the what is nowadays the Cape Province, or the Western Cape and the Northern Cape Province, and came back with a very colorful report, a lot of information which later could be verified on that. However, he claims that he crossed the Orange River into Namibia and made it up to about, at the northern end of the sheet, this is more or less the Rehoboth area. So that he traveled wildly, as you could see, in the interior, to the coast, into the desert, basically everywhere in the southern half of Namibia, and he came up with this map. There's only one small, or not one, there are multiple problems, but the biggest problem Fleuve du Poisson, fish river. So if you believe that the fish river is flowing north-south and emptying in the Orange River, it's incorrect. It's flowing from the east to the west and empties directly in the Atlantic Ocean. And Mr. Le Vaillant introduces lush forests at the mouth of the fish river, which would be, yeah, you have the Gulf of Rio in the north, and in the south you have the Orange River. So yeah, I would say somewhere at Saddle Hill, Pomona, in that area, you have lush forests, at least according to this traveler. So it was widely cited, and many accounts of southwestern Africa deep into the 19th century were based on Le Vaillant, but I would say he never ever crossed the Orange River to the north, collected a lot of hearsay, misunderstood 80% of this, and then drew a map which is nice, but it is fictitious, and you should not plan your next road trip with this map. Okay, now we get something, we have to enter the British. Ultimately, in the first decade of the 19th century, they kicked out the Dutch out of Cape Town and out of the Cape Colony, and they later developed then an interest on the coastline of Namibia, again, not because of an interest in Namibia, but because of their interest in India, and all their ships had to go along the coastline down to Cape Town and then making it off, crossing the Indian Ocean. So it is of relevance to know where are bays, what are anchorages up there, is there any provisioning possibility, is there water? something like this. And one of the earliest correct British maps of the area is here, the British Admiralty chart, 632, Plan of Ankara Pequena on the west coast of Africa, published in London 1828. So it's a 200-year-old map, and I guess most of you, even if I wouldn't tell you that it's Ankara Pequena, would recognize that it's Lüderitz Bay. So the outline of the bay for the first time shows up on a chart correctly. It is known, the bay, at this time for over 300 years, but it's for the first time that we have a correct outline that a ship could navigate and know where to go in this area. And you see Patrao of Diaz Point, here and here. And imagine at this time, you could either write a very long detail when you arrive to Lüderitzbucht, steer left, steer right. Information is much better conveyed if you have a drawing. Okay, if you come to the coast, you will see the following. And if you see this, then take your bearing, for example, to the cross. You need to see it on 160 degrees, then you are on a sound course. If you see it in 180 degrees, be cautious, there are treacherous reefs under the sea floor, under the sea level. So this is the first reliable map with which you could travel along the coastline. And it contains a lot of information which was essential. The text which you see in the middle under the scale gives you an information, gives you the crucial information that there is no water at Ankara Pequena. There's nothing. So you might be sheltered from a storm, but otherwise, if you ran out of provisions, there's nothing to get at Ankara Pequena. Don't fret, there is some resolution. You have a little distance from the beach and the country to the north, 10 miles. The country is there is water about North Bay, and where is water, there are people, and where there are people, you can trade in against goods, food. So water and food is obtainable, not in Ankara Pequena itself, but 10 miles to the north. So this is the first map which I would take in my personal collection if I would travel on a boat along the coastline. None of the earlier maps. This is the first one which is reliable, and it has nothing to do that it's British and the others are French, so forget about this. Yeah, and this map is some of the maps which I show you going forward are in the Namibia National Archive or here at the Namibia Scientific Society, so you can check on them in person here in Windhoek. This map or this chart, as soon as it's predominantly ocean or water oriented, then the technical term is a chart, everything what has to do with land, dry land, this is a map. So this chart comes from the United Kingdom Hydrographic Office, which is in Taunton. It is when you travel to the west of London. So they have a remarkable collection if you are interested in old maps, reliable maps of the first half of the 19th century of Namibia, of the coast, then a visit to Taunton is highly recommended. Okay, then let's get from the coast to the interior. We have in the 1820s a similar society like the Namibia Scientific Society was formed, the Royal Geographical Society in London. And they had the custom to send out not only to Africa, but to other parts of the world, members with the order to make notes, make sketches, and come back and report with an article. And our cartographers, and the most famous name associated with this society is the family of Arrowsmith. So they constructed out of diaries, out of field notices, of anything what was scribbled, in many cases hundreds if not thousands of pages, interviews then of the traveler, and they had to come, then they created this map. And voila, this is what I would call the first modern and correct map of Namibia, of the southern half of it. So this is a detail of the map to illustrate Captain Alexander's route. So he crossed the Orange River in the south, came then through Namaland to the north, got then to about Dordabis. This would be his easternmost point. Then, of course, visited what is nowadays Windhoek. Got then on to Grootbarmen, and then to Walvis Bay, and then traveling all the way back, and all this within little less than 6 months. And imagine, traveling is not meaning getting into your Toyota Land Cruiser. This is either walking or riding on the back of an oxen. So you don't make 80 kilometers an hour. In some cases, you are happy if you make 8 kilometers a day. So just as a background, what work gets into such a map. So this is what I would call the first modern, correct, truthful map of the interior. And it comes as with a characteristic of all the route maps. You get only the information where you travel along. Of course, you can look to the left and to the right. You can make bearing to a mountain you see in the distance. You can add information. Later travelers, one of the most famous one, a generation later, would be David Livingstone. He was, sorry to say this, since I had some not so nice things to say about the French, I have now something not so nice to say about Livingstone. He's definitely a great explorer, but he was a terrible cartographer. So he was trained as a missionary, and a missionary is not a person who normally does surveying. So this is a different education. And unfortunately, he got some things wrong, but he compensated this, more than compensated it, because as a missionary, he was keen to learn the local languages, and knowing the local languages is the ability to converse with the people on the spot and to get the local knowledge. So he was not great as a cartographer, but he was excellent as a conversationist. So he got a lot of information by asking people and by corroborating this, by asking 2 or 3 or 5, and if all say the same, okay, then there is a good reason to believe that it's correct. Otherwise, and route maps look like this. You have along the line a lot of information, but to the left and the right, it is empty. And as a map maker at home, might it be Paris, might it be London, might it be Berlin, so wherever in the 19th century, it is of course somewhere in Europe, they had to overlay 10, 20, 30 route maps that they crisscross it. Of course, there are discrepancies, so you had to make an arbitration, okay, whom do I believe? But in the end, this is one of the base maps of a Namibian cartography, which was still influencing the war map of 1904 here of Namibia. So for 80 years, this map had significant influence. Okay, this next map I had to get in for various reasons. First, it is a map which illustrates the travels of Francis Galton. At the beginning, together with Carl Anderson, the Swedish merchant and later exploration traveler. And thirdly, this is a map by my personal cartographic hero, August Petermann. By the way, August Petermann is German, and I'm not biased to say this. This map is by style more or less the same like the previous one. So it is Francis Galton and it's Anderson traveling jointly from Walvis Bay into the edges of the Kalahari. This is on the right side. Then to the north, they travel to Lake Ochikoto and then make it to Ovambo Land. But this map looks much more modern than the previous one. Why? This is then some careful manipulation by the cartographer. So when the traveler report for a couple of days to the left and to the right, I see green bushland or open savanna, then he took the liberty to extend it for not just only 10 miles, but for 100 or 200 miles to the left and to the right. And since he is a professional cartographer, the desert is in yellowish or in light brownish tones, and where it's green or where the vegetation is more prevalent, then you have greener color. So this gives you a filling of the map, but okay, although he is German, I have to say, it's a little bit overstretching what Francis Galton and what Anderson reported back. But it makes for a very nice map, and you could see this map. It's here in the collection of the Namibia Scientific Society, and it's in the Namibia National Archives. Also, if you want to physically, tactile feel the maps, you can get close to it. By style, it is the same. It is a route map. Okay. Good. A little bit of update. What is happening? We are by now in the middle of the 19th century. Most of this map, you see the British colonial advance in Southern Africa in the second half of the 19th century. So most of the map is not of interest for us. What is of interest for us is that in 1876, the British Cape Colony tries to annex the territory north of the Orange River. But in 2 years later, okay, they annexed it, but they had to ask for permission to get it incorporated into the British Empire in London. And in London, guess what they said? Too expensive. We can't manage it. So get rid of it. We only keep two pieces. One is the best port along the coastline. This is Walvis Bay. This is the reason why Walvis Bay in 1878 came into being. And you see to the left of Ancra Pequena, the Penguin Islands. Why were they kept for the British? Remember what happened in 1844? Okay, I guess nobody here in the room was around in 1844, so you can't remember it. So I will tell you, it is the guano boom. It is the discovery of guano, and it is the gray gold rush. So a lot of ships came, and it was just like the gold rush in Colorado or the gold rush in Australia. A lot of money was to be made. And of course, it makes sense to annex these islands. So in 1878, only the islands, and you can see the exclave of Walvis Bay was retained by the British. The rest was left open, and there's always a punishment if you don't, as an imperialist, if you don't pick up something, then somebody else picks it up. And we all know what happened in 1883, 84. Mr. Lüderitz, the Germans came in, and later what developed in what is nowadays Namibia. So this is as a background to what you see then on the final maps. Okay, this is in addition to the previous map. You see by the 1880s, the Portuguese to the north, they have just reached Moçambique, so not really the Cunene in the south. The British by the 1880s controlled the coastline up till the Orange River, but the interior was more or less not controlled by European or by Boer parties. For Namibia, of interest is what I gave you there as brown. These are the acquisitions by Lüderitz. So this is basically all the coastline. The extension towards Windhoek, this is the area of the Afrikaner, who signed a protection treaty with Lüderitz and later then with German Empire. And then you have in the interior, in the south, all the Nama people who between 1884 and 1894 signed treaties with the Germans, and in the north, the Herero did the same. And then you have then the expansion, the race to the interior, the scramble for Africa in the 1880s, in the 1890s. Everybody wanted to grab as much as possible. And the Portuguese tried to get the low sea, so what is the western part of modern Zambia. And we all know about the great imperialist Cecil John Rhodes, who made the mad dash, the pioneer column to Salisbury, what is nowadays Harare, and the setup of Rhodesia. And the Germans got then Deutsch Südwestafrika or German Southwest Africa. Okay, this is as a background what happened. Then we have another great traveler. In this case, it is the Swede Carl Johan Andersen, and this is just one of his maps, and this is constructed not by the German cartographer August Petermann, but by Arrowsmith, and Arrowsmith very closely stayed to what the traveler reported. And you see, it's basically only the information where he personally was, and in case there is information where he didn't travel, then Arrowsmith took it then from previous travelers. What you should take along from the 1860s onwards, the map through route maps get denser and denser and denser and much closer to a representation as we know it. This is, okay, unfortunately, the screen is above it, but I can tell you that this map is from 1878, and it is a map again by August Petermann. This was the one who was so creative about this earlier map, and he plots all the routes by Rhenish missionaries until the year 1878, and you can see here all the, or a lot of the mission station. Just the detail I took, you have on the coast Cape Cross. This is where the Portuguese landed with the Patrão. You have Walfish Bay. I will show you some more details about Walfish Bay in a minute. On the upper edge of the map, you have the mission station Okombaha. You have then Ochimbingwe, you have Ochikango or New Barman. So all these places, and of course you have Windhoek as the former place of Jonker, of the place of Jonker Afrikaner. So this is the knowledge of the interior by the year 1878, and it is remarkably detailed. many parts, I would say 95% of the surface of Africa in the year 1880 were not covered to such a detail. The backdrop to it is that when the Germans took over, Bismarck was sitting on his purse. As we all know, he sent only 3 officials to govern Namibia. Okay, possibly nowadays the government is too big, but definitively 3 individuals to govern all of Namibia was way too little, and they couldn't do anything mapping-wise. So this map of 1878 was a very widely used map for traveling in Namibia up to 1904. Imagine when we had the incident of 1904 and you sent German troops to fight then against the Herero, and you don't know the land, you don't know the culture, you don't know the plants, what is edible, what is not edible, what you need to do or what you should better avoid, and you have then a map on the scale of 2.2 million, and then you are basically lost. But this map was one of the to-go maps for the next 25 years. I have to introduce you to the, not arguably, definitively, the best 19th century map of Namibia. I show you here the full map on the left by Johann Theophilus Hahn, original map of Great Namakwa Land and Damaraland. So Great Namakwa Land states for everything south of the Swakop, and Damaraland is in the lingo of the time, everything to the north of the Swakop. It is a remarkably detailed map on 4 sheets. It is a huge map, 157 by 104 centimeters. The scale is remarkable, 1 to 742,000, and it shows a lot of astronomic observation. Why are astronomic observation important? Have a look here. Gibeon, we have here Rambart, and we have here Beersheba. Mr. Hahn got an education as a surveyor, and he could read then a theodolite, and he could do an astronomic observation. An astronomic observation fixes a point by longitude and latitude. So if you travel along a route from a known point, the farther you get away from a known point, the more imprecise you get. The errors add up the farther away you get from a known point. So it's paramount for a good map to have a network of known points where you can link a route map to. And he was the first to come up with such observations, and he filled in all the then traveled routes. And this, even if you would travel today, okay, it's not the highway on, but you could definitively get from Beersheba to Gibeon and further down to Warmbad. I would not venture into the Karas Mountain with this map. Obviously, on the right edge of the map, it's just mole humps, so there is not much information. So better stay clear of the Karas Mountains if you travel with this map. But if you travel along the Fish River, which is shown, of course, as it flows from the north to the south, it is remarkably correct. So this is, and of course we have here in the Namibia Scientific Society a copy of this map. This is the greatest 19th century map of Namibia, done by a son of a Rhenish missionary who fell on hard times because he wanted to get the British here in, and when the British pulled out of the interior of Namibia, he had to sell this map for very, very little money, and to the Surveyor General in Cape Town. There it was published, and unfortunately was printed on bad paper. So all the known surviving copies have, yeah, some of them are folded, many of them have gaps therein, but by content, it is the, as I said, the best map of the 19th century of Namibia south of Ovambo land. So anything south is remarkably well covered. I promised you that we get back to the coast. So this is Walfish Bay. For orientation, in the center, you see where the bay is. This is where the settlement today is. On the left, on the blank spot, there would be Swakopmund, and you see the outline of the enclave of Walvis Bay. The mercy of Zoom covers the most interesting part of the Walvis Bay enclave, because Walvis Bay had the same problem like Lüderitz Bay, no water. You can't have a settlement or any economic activities without potable water. So where do you get your water? And exactly where the Zoom screen is, there is Ururas, there is Roybank. So the ones who know the area, who traveled, believe me if I tell you that underneath the screen there is Roybank. So this is a rocky outcrop which basically dams the underground flow in the Kuisep, and there you can dig for water and you can get it by pipeline to Walvis Bay. So it was important to secure this for the British so that they had water there. The only problem is that Ururas and the area was not mentioned in the proclamation of Walvis Bay in 1878. So the surveyor, Philip Ray, when he did this plan in 1885, published in 1886, he took the liberty to include Roybank and Ururas in this area. And the Germans said, wait a minute, where is it written? And this led then to a lengthy conflict between the British and the Germans. In the end, it was brought to the International Court of Justice in The Hague. And as late as 1911, there was an award given by the arbitrator. Sorry, I walk it back, not to the Court of Justice, to the King of Spain. The King of Spain gave them the award and said, Mr. Vray is correct. And with that, Germany, as in the colony of Southwest Africa, lost leverage to have the British conform more with the German wishes, because if you don't have drinking water, then you better listen to the one who sits on the water. This was not the case. So this map is of 1886. And now we have to introduce finally the Germans in the end, because in 1884, Mr. Lüderitz started the operation in then Ankara Pequena. 2 years later, he died. Ankara Pequena was renamed in honor of him, Lüderitzbucht. And opinion was first, okay, we strike it rich. There are mineral riches. Mr. Lüderitz was right, but it took another 20 years that diamonds ultimately were found. Initially, after 1 or 2 years, everybody saw, okay, it's only sand dunes. So no farming, no mining, nothing. We can't do anything. And the port of Lüderitz is too far off. So imagine you sit up in Grootfontein or in Damara-land. It's a terrible long way all the way down to Ankara-Pequena or to Lüderitz. So we need a harbor in the middle of the coast. Unfortunately, there the British are sitting on this map. And here is the water. Okay, where can a German port be built in the center of the colony? Hopes were high in the 1880s that this could be Sandfischhafen, Sandwich Harbor. Nobody had any knowledge about Sandwich Harbor, so for the first and only time, a professional geologist was sent out before the discovery of diamonds. He traveled only for about 5 weeks in the interior, came up with a remarkable map of the lower Kuisip, making geological observations and traveling from Hinub on the lower Kuisip across the sand dunes. Here we are about 250 meters above sea level and crossing then all the dunes. Everybody who has ever been in the area knows that it's a very arduous journey, and getting then to Sandwich Harbor, he proved that the water at Sandwich Harbor comes from the Kuisip. However, too little to build then a German harbor over there. So Sandwich Harbor was out of the picture, and then the Germans then looked then to the north, and the upstart, which finally was named Swakopmund, came into being. If there would have been more water at Sandwich Harbor, you wouldn't go for your December and January vacation to Swakopmund, you would stay in Sandwich Harbor. For me, as an occasional visitor to Namibia, you are much better off in Swakopmund than in Sandwich Harbor. Okay, there we have the situation at Sandwich Harbor, at Swakopmund. This is, and here again you are in advantage that you are sitting here in tonight, because in the journal only this map and this coastal view will be in, but not this further orientation which I provide you. On the left side, you have the 1897 edition of the official German marine chart, so Navy chart of the situation of Swakopmund. And we all know Swakopmund is not an ideal harbor. There is a reason why in 1918, when the South African took over, they immediately closed down the harbor operation, because it is very shallow water. You have a treacherous surf, so it's not easy at all to get something from the ship to the land or in the opposite direction. But in the 1890s, this was the only hope. As is still today custom on many charts, so maritime maps, that you not only have the plot, what is the coastline, what are the depths, what are the soundings, where is good anchorage, and this is where the treacherous surface, so you should stay out of this area. But still today, for remote areas where not so much traffic is, you have views, coastal views, and this is printed on this very same map outside the needline of this chart. You have a view of how Swakopmund looked in 1897. So you have here the Kolonialgesellschaft, the building, you have Troost, there is Mertens and Sichel, and you have here some other features, obviously only which you can see clearly from the coast. So it's not meant to be a road map and town plan of Swakopmund, but for navigation of a captain to see, okay, am I in the right position to make anchor? I gave you then here about the same time, only 1 year later, Theodor Rehbock was commissioned to find out how can we develop the harbor of Swakopmund. We all know the Mole, we know what is left of the Landungsbrücke, but originally the plans in 1898 were much more far-flung, that you would have a real big enclosed harbor where the ships could dock on harbor facilities. None of this was built. The only thing what was built on the right-hand side was the water pipeline from the Swakop River into Swakopmund. This is the only thing what got developed. Ultimately, we get then to this map. What I have shown you so far are either navigational charts for seafaring or topographic maps of the interior. Topographic maps are in the 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century the most prevalent ones. Most maps have topographic information, so a lot of information on the place, what the surface looks like, what the vegetation is, are there roads, where are the settlements. So this is what typically goes on in topographical maps. But there's a whole zoological park of maps. When you switch on your TV, at the end of the news, there is a weather chart. When you have elections, you have an election chart. Which party won which election district? This is a map. So there are much more maps than topographical maps. And the very last map I want to show you tonight is a property map. When the Germans took over Namibia as a colonial parcel, colonization is about valorization. The reason d'etre of a colony is that it helps to promote the economic benefit of the metropolis. So the British had India not for advancing the people over there, but to gain profit out of India. And the same is for the Germans, to gain profit out of Namibia. How do you get profit out of any colony is you need to develop it. You need to have infrastructure there. And one of the most important infrastructures well into the 20th century was the railroad, because this is a cost-effective way not to have ox wagons. Think about Rinderpest and all the problems with an ox wagon to cross the Namib. Most of the load on your wagon would be fodder for the oxen, so there is not much payload. So there are a lot of reasons why it was paramount to develop Namibia is to build railroads. And when there are railroads, you can have commercial activities. Commercial activities include mining and farming. These were the foremost at the beginning of the 20th century. And this is in detail of the first Besitzstandskarte or property map of Namibia or of Deutsch Südwestafrika, published in 1902. And second version was in 1905, and third version in 1911. And this map, of which I show you on the top right side, just the upper half, this morphed then later when the South Africans took over. The 1911 version, which was in the scale of 1 to 800,000, a huge map. If I would place it here on the wall, it would almost go from the bottom to the top. You can't travel and you can't work with a map like this. So the British or the South Africans decided we reduce it in the scale to 1 to 2 million, and it became the famous farm map. Most of you here in the room know the farm map. You have possibly a couple of years ago traveled along it. So this is the very original, this is the starting point of the farm map. And what do you see on this map? This is a fascinating map. Also, no mountains are on. So let me introduce you what you see here. So you see first, this is Deutsche Kolonialgesellschaft für Südwestafrika. So this is the company which took over from Lüderitz. So this is chartered company private land. Here you would have houses, for example. You have here this in orange. This is the northern edge of the Rehoboth territory. What is here in yellow, this sea ice here, for example, these are the very tiny spots which in 1902 were at some point government. So, government property, so fiscus land. And to the north, you have the area of the Herero. And this is the administrative background, so to say, and as an overlay in green, you see farms. So this is the situation in 1902. You can see around Windhoek, this is the bottom right quadrant, you see a lot of farms in green. If something is in bold green, then this farm is sold and surveyed, and when it's surveyed, you could get a title deed. So you could have farms only sold, and this is where only the border, the marginal color is green. These were farms which were sold by the owner, but not surveyed yet, and without a survey in German time, you couldn't get a title deed in the end. So it needed to have a survey. And what is the situation in 1902? You have the Staatsbahn, the railroad coming all the way from Swakopmund via Usakos and Karibib. You see here Chakalswata in the bottom left, then Karibib, Okahandja, and then right down to Windhoek, and it passes through Herero land, through what is the property of the Herero. And before the railroad went, there was hardly an interest, because you couldn't make anything of land. Even if you would own something there, whatever you produce, how do you get it out of Herero land down to Swakopmund? It didn't pay. But as soon as the railroad was built, the farms sprang up around Karibib, you can see it, all the farms, and they were, this is a whole different story, obviously traders who purveyed goods, rifles, spirits, other commodities to the ruling class of the Herero. And at some time, the trader said, okay, I want payment. If you don't have money, either give me cattle. No, you don't get cattle. Then I want land. Okay, I sign a paper. And only 2 years later, the Herero realized, okay, we are not on a sustainable path for our well-being, and we all know what happened then in January 1904. But this is a story for another presentation. I will end here. These are the first 400 years of the cartography of Namibia. Possibly I can give a presentation on the next 100 years of cartography of Namibia.
Thank you very much. Considering that it's, 20 past 8, I think we take a couple of questions and then we go over to the gemütliche Teil des Abends, and whoever has more questions then goes to speak to Mr. Demhardt himself. Please, for the purpose of our Zoom listeners, if you have any questions, allow me time to give you the microphone. Who's first?
Thank you very much. Maps are very interesting. I just wanted to know, between the cartographers and the historians, how sense of, because the maps constantly have Damara land, Herero land, and as the time progresses, Damara land becomes smaller, Herero land becomes bigger. In the end, Damara land kind of becomes very minute somewhere in a corner. So how does one correlate the cartography with the historical facts about ethnic occupation of land?
In the early, I would say, right until the 1870s or 1880s, Damara land was the synonym for everything north of the Swakop and south of Ovambo land. So everybody who lived in there, might it be the Damara, might it be the Bushman, might it be the Herero, everything was termed under Damara. There was not made a distinction that in Damara is obviously not in Herero, and in Bushman is something completely different. So this was the generic name for everything to the north. It was only at around 1900 that we see and start that the name Damara, cartographically speaking, is restricted to the mountainous part, which we later became to know as Damara land. But for most of the period I was presenting tonight, Damara simply means everything what is not Khoikhoi, to put it this way, everything to the north.
Thank you very much. I just have a very small question, and that concerns the Kriegskarte. I'd be interested to know why you didn't touch on that, because it's got considerable detail in times when I don't think there were very precise surveys possible.
There are a number of reasons why I didn't include the Kriegskarte. One reason is a paper has only a certain number of pages which you can go into, but more real is that it's a whole can of worm if I would include the Kriegskarte because of the whole political situation around it. And when we talk about Kriegskarte, it is a quick shot. So it was produced within a couple of weeks, and what for accuracy, for example, a lot of the information on the Hahn map of 1878 is more correct, has not the mistakes which are on the Kriegskarte of 1904. So the Kriegskarte is remarkable in the sense that it's the only German map series which was ever completed on Namibia. The Germans started, if you include private maps of the Sperrgebiet, for example, I would say at least a dozen of map series, and only the only official, not private one, the only official one which was completed was the Kriegskarte, but owing to the haste with which it was compiled, it was for the fight out in the field, it was not really helpful, put it this way. You relied then more on local knowledge, on you had local guides who told you, okay, show you the map, I want to get there, and they told you, sorry, but there is not, the path which is on the map doesn't exist, you have to go this way. So I left out the Kriegskarte because for accuracy and content, I would say it is a step back. Nowadays, it is the most famous of all Namibian maps. So if you would ask anybody, have you ever seen any map, historic map of Namibia? Most people would say, yes, Kriegskarte. And not the least thanks to the Namibia Scientific Society with the many reprints of the map. It's in many households. I have 3 of these reprint sets. So it is a famous map, but in the development of cartography, it is not a milestone, put it this way.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for your presentation. It was absolutely interesting. My name is Peter. I'm a guest from Germany here. And I want to go back to your first map. The question is, around 1500, something like that. The question is, in those days, people weren't sure whether the world is a globe or whether it's flat, where you could fall to the hell if you go to the edge. So could you depict any specific, let's say, signs on the maps that drive the cartographer or the drawer of the map into one of the 2 directions? Was he or were the people of the opinion who draw the map that the world is a globe or the opposite? Thank
you. Yeah. Sorry to say, but in 1502, nobody, except very few not professional people, were thinking that the Earth is flat. There is the conception that the dark Middle Ages were thinking of a flat pancake, and when you reach the edge of the pancake, you will fall down to hell or to wherever. This is simply incorrect. In late antiquity, throughout the medieval ages, most of the people writing cosmographies, so descriptions of the world, had the clear concept that the world is a globe. There was, of course, discrepancies how big the globe is. By 1500, when the map was produced, I showed you, we had already the Renaissance. So we had the rediscovery of the Ptolemy map of the 2nd century AD, so a Roman map which showed Europe, Northern Africa, parts of Asia, but already including India. And this was based on a concept of the Earth, which is only about 2% of the real circumference of the Earth. And this map by Ptolemy, you can work, it is integrated, okay, not in Southern Africa. Ptolemy didn't know anything about Southern Africa, but in the areas where he came up with information, this is, I would say, until about 1600, where Ptolemy had information. Only in about 1600, cartographers said, okay, we leave him aside, we have now more and better information. But I only mention this, the idea that many people, not even most of the people then, had the idea that the Earth is flat, is a misconception. This is an urban myth. Sorry to say this.
Okay, one final question.
I see on many of your maps you have latitudes and longitudes indicated. Were these lines added later?
When this is on an original map, so I showed you 3 maps which I concocted myself, so these orientation maps, there I added it, but on all the contemporary maps, if there are longitude and latitude, this is the original work of a cartographer. Remember, I told you, a map has 2 components. It has the skeleton and it has the flesh. The skeleton is where exactly a point is. Where is Lüderitz? Where is Windhoek? Longitude, latitude-wise speaking. And then you fill in the topographic information. Are there mountains? Are there rivers, roads, settlements? But you hang this basically like the flesh hangs on a human skeleton, so on a map you hang the topographic information on the geodetic information. And this geodetic information is one of the main works of a professional map maker, because otherwise you and I could now sit here on the table and we could draw a map of Namibia. Whether you would travel along it, this is something different, but obviously we could come with a scribble up, but that we can call it a map which is truthful. It needs to have the skeleton of a geodetic framework of longitude, latitude. This is in general. When we get to the details, then we have the longitude, latitude system, Greenwich, Paris, Hierro, Berlin, and it was only in the 1870s that it was internationally agreed we use the Greenwich system. And then we still have the problem, latitude. Everybody can learn to observe a latitude in a couple of minutes, but to observe and to calculate a longitude, therefore you need to be an astronomer. So this is more difficult. So even if you have longitude and latitude on a map, it doesn't necessarily say that these are the correct ones. So the short answer, yes, everything what you saw on the map was contemporary.
Thank you very much. With this, I'm going to now pull the string. I can inform you, number one, that we have recorded this session and that the PowerPoint presentation with the recording will be on our YouTube channel, should you want to revisit the topic again. I can also tell you that on the PowerPoint presentation, the first slide is the email address of Mr. Ed Demhardt, and I'm quite sure he'll answer any question that you would like to post to him directly. Then I can inform you that I think next week, Thursday, we've got a documentary showing of Ericsson and Anderson and their travels. So if this is a topic that interests you, that documentary might also interest you. And then I can now tell you that the article that he was referring to will be published in this Journal of the Scientific Society, which is going to be available in about a month or so. And the journal article is also available online. So if this is a topic that does interest you, please do not hesitate to either contact us, consult the journal, contact Mr. Demhardt himself. With that, I would like to really thank you for your time that you've spent teaching us about maps and the history that you can learn around about it. I had the privilege of listening to you a couple of times, and it's fascinating every single time. And then, yes, join us for a glass of wine and have a little bit of a chat. Thank you.